Say no politely in English. Hello, my friends. Welcome back to English Stories Podcast, the place where we learn real English for real life, calmly, clearly, and without pressure. Let me ask you something honest before we begin. Have you ever wanted to say no in English, but your mind suddenly froze? You knew what you wanted to say, but fear stopped you. Fear that if you sound polite, people will think you are weak. Fear that if you speak directly, people will think you are rude. This is one of the biggest inner conflicts English learners face, especially at work, in meetings, or even with friends. On one side, you want to be respectful. You want to be kind. You don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. On the other side, you want to protect your time, your energy, and your boundaries. You don't want to say yes when you're tired, busy, or simply not interested. So you feel stuck between two choices. Polite means weak. Strong means rude. And because of this fear, many learners choose a third option. They avoid speaking. They say yes even when they want to say no. They apologize again and again. Or they stay silent and feel uncomfortable inside. If this sounds familiar, you are not alone. Many people who speak English as a second language experience this, even at an intermediate or advanced level. The problem is not your grammar. The problem is not your vocabulary. The problem is the belief that you must choose between being polite and being confident. But here is the truth, and this is the most important message of today's episode. You do not need to choose one or the other. You can be polite and confident at the same time. Saying no does not make you a bad person. Saying no politely does not make you weak, and saying no clearly does not make you rude. In English, politeness is not about making yourself small. It is not about apologizing all the time. It is not about sounding unsure. Politeness in English is about respect. Respect for the other person and respect for yourself. When you say no calmly and clearly, you are not attacking anyone. You are simply communicating your limits. And having limits is not a weakness. It is a sign of confidence. Many English learners believe that native speakers respect loud voices or aggressive language, but that is not true. Native speakers respect clarity. They respect calm communication. They respect people who know what they can and cannot do. In this episode, we are going to focus on one very practical and very emotional skill. How to say no politely in English without feeling guilty, without over-apologizing, and without sounding weak. You will learn simple sentences that native speakers actually use in real life, at work, in emails, in conversations, and in social situations. No long grammar explanations, no complicated words, just clear, natural English that helps you protect your boundaries and still sound respectful. If you have ever said yes when you wanted to say no, if you have ever felt stressed because you agreed to something you didn't want to do, or if you have ever worried that people won't like you if you refuse, then this episode is for you. Stay with me, relax, and remember this as we begin. You don't need perfect English to be confident. You don't need to be rude to be strong, and you don't need to feel guilty for saying no. Now let's talk about the most common mistakes English learners make when they try to say no, because understanding these mistakes is the first step to changing them. In my experience, most learners fall into two very clear groups, and maybe you will recognize yourself in one of them. The first group is the learners who become too direct. When they feel pressure, when they feel tired or when they want to protect themselves, they suddenly switch to very short, hard sentences. They say things like, "No, I can't," or "I don't want to," or "That's not my job." Grammatically, these sentences are correct, A boundary is simply a clear line that shows what you can accept and what you cannot. Having boundaries does not make you difficult. It makes you clear. And clarity is the foundation of confidence. This is where the idea of polite confidence comes in. Polite confidence means you communicate your needs, your limits, and your decisions in a calm and respectful way. You are not attacking anyone. You are not explaining your whole life story. You are not apologizing for existing. You are simply stating your position with clarity. When you say no with polite confidence, your voice is calm, your words are simple, and your message is clear. You do not sound angry, and you do not sound afraid. You sound grounded. This kind of communication feels safe to other people, even if they do not get the answer they want. They know where the line is, and that creates trust. Many learners believe that confidence comes from advanced grammar or strong vocabulary, but that is not true. Confidence comes from how clear your message is. You can make small grammar mistakes and still sound confident if your message is calm and direct. On the other hand, you can use perfect grammar and still sound weak if your message is unclear and full of apologies. This is why learning polite confidence is so important. It allows you to be kind without being small and strong without being rude. When you understand that polite does not mean weak, you stop fighting with yourself. You stop feeling guilty for saying no, and you begin to speak with a quiet confidence that people naturally respect. Now let's move to one of the most powerful and practical ideas in polite English, the golden rule you can use in almost any situation. Soft verb, strong message. This rule will completely change the way you say no and the way you make requests, especially in professional and social situations. Many English learners make the mistake of weakening the entire message when they want to sound polite. They add too many extra words. They explain too much. They apologize again and again. As a result, the listener becomes confused and the message loses its strength. But politeness does not require a weak message. What it requires is a softer verb. Your intention can be firm. Your boundary can be clear. You only need to adjust how you deliver it. Let's look at a very simple example. Send me the file. This sentence is very direct. It is clear, but it feels like a command. In many situations, especially at work, this can sound cold or aggressive. Now listen to this version. Could you send me the file, please? The message is almost exactly the same. You still want the file. You still want action. You did not change your goal. What changed is the verb. By using could instead of send, and by adding please at the end, the sentence becomes respectful. It no longer sounds like an order, but it also does not sound weak. This is the key. You did not reduce your message. You softened the verb. Many learners think they need long sentences to sound polite, but the opposite is often true. Short and clear sentences usually sound more confident than long, emotional ones. For example, compare this. Sorry to bother you, but I was just wondering if maybe you could possibly send me the file today if that's okay. This sentence is full of apologies and hesitation. The listener may feel uncomfortable, or they may think the request is not important. Now compare it with this. Could you send me the file today, please? Short, clear, calm. This sentence sounds stronger, even though it is more polite. This principle also applies when you say no. You do not need to remove your boundary to be polite. You simply need to choose a softer verb. Instead of saying, I can't do that, which sounds hard, You can say, I'm afraid I can't help with that. The message is still no. The boundary is still clear, but the feeling is respectful and calm. When you use soft verbs, you give the other person emotional space. You show respect without giving up control. This is why this rule works so well in real life. People do not feel attacked, and you do not feel guilty. Remember this. Your message should stay strong. Your limit should stay clear. Only the verb needs to be gentle. When you follow this rule, your English sounds natural, confident, and professional. And most importantly, people understand you. Now let's focus on something you do every day in English, making requests, and how to do it politely and confidently without feeling uncomfortable. Many learners believe that asking for something is already a problem, so they try to make the request very small. They add apologies, excuses, and extra explanations. But asking for something is normal. It is part of communication, especially at work, in emails, and in meetings. The key is to use a clear structure and a calm tone. One of the safest and most natural structures in English is can you plus the verb plus please. For example, can you check this for me, please? This Remember, confidence is not about being perfect. It is about being present and calm. When your tone is calm, your words feel stronger, and people are more likely to respect what you say. Now we arrive at one of the most emotional and difficult skills for many English learners, saying no politely without feeling guilty. The biggest mistake learners make here is believing that saying no requires an apology, hesitation, or a long explanation. When someone asks for help or invites you to do something, and you immediately say sorry, hesitate, and start explaining your whole situation, you send the message that you are doing something wrong. But saying no is not a mistake. It is simply a decision. When you add too many excuses, your message becomes weak and unclear, and the other person may feel uncomfortable or may even try to change your mind. A polite and confident no is calm, short, and clear. One very powerful structure you can use is, "I'm afraid I can't." For example, "I'm afraid I can't help with this today." This sentence is polite, professional, and clear. The phrase, "I'm afraid," does not mean you are scared. It is a soft, respectful way to introduce a refusal. You are not apologizing. You are informing. Another very natural structure is for invitations. When someone invites you to dinner or an event and you do not want to go, you can say, "Thanks for the invitation, but I'll have to pass." This sentence is warm and friendly, but the no is still clear. You do not sound cold, and you do not sound guilty. A simple and useful formula to remember is thank you, then no, then an optional reason. For example, "Thank you for asking, but I won't be able to help today." Or "Thank you, but I already have plans." Notice that the reason is optional. You do not owe anyone a long explanation. Now let's move to another challenging area, disagreeing without creating tension. Many learners believe disagreement is dangerous. They think if they disagree, people will get angry or stop respecting them. Because of this fear, they choose one of two extremes. The first extreme is aggressive disagreement. They say things like, "That's wrong, I don't agree," or "You're mistaken." These sentences may be honest, but they sound hard and can damage relationships. The second extreme is passive agreement. Learners say yes, maybe, or "You're probably right," even when they disagree inside. This hides their true opinion and makes them feel invisible. The key to polite and confident disagreement is to start with empathy. You show that you understand the other person before sharing a different view. For example, you can say, "I see your point, but I think there is another way to look at this." Or, "I understand why you think that. However, I see it a bit differently." These sentences create space for discussion instead of conflict. You are not attacking, you are joining the conversation. This approach is especially useful in meetings. You can say, "That's an interesting point, but I'm not sure it will work in the long term." This sounds thoughtful and professional. When you learn to say no and disagree politely, you protect your boundaries and your relationships at the same time. You speak with clarity, calm, and respect, and that is what real confidence sounds like. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to remember the most important message. Being polite does not mean being weak, and being clear does not mean being rude. In real English communication, clarity is confidence. When your message is clear, calm, and respectful, people understand you, and that understanding creates respect. You do not need to speak loudly to sound strong, and you do not need to apologize to sound polite. You only need to communicate your thoughts and limits with honesty and calmness. I want to remind you of something very important. You do not need perfect English to be respected. You do not need advanced vocabulary or perfect grammar to sound confident. What truly matters is how clearly you express yourself and how calmly you speak. Even simple English, when used with clarity and respect, can sound powerful. Saying no politely, making clear requests, and expressing disagreement in a calm way are real-life skills, not language tricks. These are skills you can practice every day, little by little. Before you go, I would love to hear from you. Comment below and tell me which situation you are most afraid of. Is it saying no at work, refusing an invitation, or disagreeing in a meeting? Your comments help me understand your challenges and create future episodes that truly support you. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to English Stories Podcast so you don't miss the next episode. We focus on real English for real life, spoken calmly, clearly, and naturally. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for learning with me, and thank you for taking another step toward confident English. Until next time, keep practicing. Keep believing in yourself.